All right, let me catch up here. All right, have I missed anyone who needs to be able to record? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are holding this press conference with family members of loved ones who have been killed or abused by the Prince George's Police Department, along with community and civil rights groups who fought to make the Graham Expert Witness Report public. And we will be detailing 5 demands following the extensive racism and retaliation that were detailed in the unredacted Graham report. And we will be then taking questions at the end. First, we will hear from Nikki Owens, who will detail our demands and also comment herself. Nikki, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Meredith. The 5 demands that we put forth are: 1, clean house and install a new administration for the Prince George's County Police Department, removing everyone at the top, including Acting Chief Hector Velez, Commander Kathleen Mills, former head of the Internal Affairs, and Prince George's Chief Administrative Officer for Public Safety, Mark McGaw. There must be a community-led process for selecting the new chief. The second demand is accountability for Prince George's County for trying to hide full details of the Graham Witness Report from the public, and for spending millions of taxpayer dollars to defend the police conduct. Those resources should be redirected to fully address the abuse, discrimination, and retaliation brought to light in the lawsuit brought by Black and brown officers. The third demand is to empower the Prince George's Citizens Complaint Oversight Panel to impose discipline and provide members of the panel be nominated through a community-based process, and that is representative of districts. 4, terminate and prosecute officers who have committed perjury and cannot testify in court, or who have records of abuse of Black and brown community members. And 5, make PG County PD more transparent and accountable by posting and make viewable online to the public in real time trial board hearings of officer misconduct. So those are the 5 demands that were listed in the media advisory. I don't really have a statement to make pertaining to the Graham report. As I'm sure many people believe, that the Graham report speaks for itself. I've been reading the Graham report, and it's disappointing to know that all of this information that's in this report was known by several people within PG County, going all the way up to Angela Alsobrooks. This is not information that could not have been used to stop the abuse and the murder of several people years ago. But instead of them taking this information and actually putting it to use, they decided to do nothing about it. What I'd like to say is more to the public. I would like one thing to be said, that I want the public to understand that these these officers in this Graham report, they had a lot to lose, and they went through a lot to be able to speak out about the abuse that they were experiencing. And they not only spoke out about their personal abuse, they spoke out about the abuse that were happening to citizens. And that took a lot for them to go against the grain. Systemic racism is rampant within policing, within our entire judicial system. And these people tried to take a stand against it, and they were mistreated and abused, and no one listened. No one listened to them. I would like for the public to understand that there are police officers that are out there that are trying to take a stand, and we need to take a stand with them. We need to stand behind them. We need to continue to file complaints. And when those complaints don't go anywhere, we need to continue to push it further. Michael Owen would not have been on the force. He would not have killed William Green if these officers had been listened to, if there was a real investigation by the Prince George's County Police, Internal Affairs, by the Department of Justice. If anybody had truly done a thorough investigation, he would not have still been on the force on January 27th of 2020. So I just want to encourage the public to speak out, support the officers that are trying to speak out. We have to stop having fear of the police. A lot of people think that the police are powerful and that we all fear the police. The only reason why the police are powerful is because of the fear that they instill. If we no longer have that fear of the police, then they have no power. It takes away their power. And in that way, they will only be able to do the job that they're supposed to do, which is to police and protect the public, not abuse the public and murder private citizens. I would also like to make a statement to the press. Often when these cases happen, when men are beaten, women are beaten, we are murdered, you victimize the victim. You thoroughly investigate the victim. You pull up their police records from 20 years ago, and you use it to justify a murder that happened 20 years later by claiming that they deserved it because they committed crimes. And at that point in time, they were not committing a crime. So I would implore the press to do a better job in understanding that these people have families. These people have people that love them and care about them. And the way that you guys take the victims, some of the victims of these incidents, and you skew the public view of them by demonizing them for things that they did in their past, first of all, none of you will want that done to you or anyone that you love. So your job is to report the news, to report the truth, to get it out there. So if a lot of the truth about these officers was compiled, and every time they did something else, all of that stuff that they did in the past was brought up, then maybe there could have been a change that happened. Maybe that would have made all of these activists more powerful in their fight. I just really feel like, as the press, you guys need to do a better job of actually reporting the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. If you're going to victimize, if you're going to pull up the record of that victim, then you need to pull up the record of that officer too. You need to show the full picture of what's going on. So I would just hope that you guys do a better job with that when you're going through and this happens again, because at this point, it's inevitable that this is going to happen again because lawmakers are just not willing to do the right thing. William Green is a victim of everything within this Graham report. He's a victim of all the demands. He's a victim. If any of these things would have been addressed, he would probably be here today. So I would just like to say that the Graham report, read it, understand it. For every one of these officers that are complaining and saying that they're being discriminated against. They have families, they have people who love them, and these people are suffering with them. Just realize that there's victims that go along with all of this, and it doesn't stop just with that one person. It trickles down throughout their family, throughout their friendships. These people are suffering from PTSD. These people have so many different things that they're going through right now, and you need to consider that. And I want the public to consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Dawn, are you ready to speak, or would you like to speak a little bit later?
Well, actually, I did want to speak later, but I'll just go ahead and follow up with what Nikki said. I think Nikki summed it up great. She pretty much hit all the key points. I think the Graham report is a great read. I think it speaks for itself. It's time for those empowered to do the right thing, to protect us. That's what you're in office to do. And no more. Like, it's just time for us to get justice. It's time for our community of Black and brown young men and women, even the officers, we're human beings. We need to be humanized, and it's time for the narrative to change. At the end of the day, just do the right thing. I don't have to sit up here and talk for 10 minutes. We all see what we see. We know what we know. Let's not pretend that this does not exist. In Annapolis right now, we're fighting to get laws changed just so that there is accountability and so that there is transparency, so that there are no more William Greens. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna make mine short and sweet. I think the Graham report speaks for itself, and it's time for everybody to do the right thing. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Next, we're going to hear from Linda Thornton Thomas, President of the Prince George's County NAACP.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am the president of the Prince George's County NAACP, and the mission of the NAACP is to ensure the equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination. It is important that we help identify systems that are not adequately working and find ways to improve those systems. Now, we are in support of the officers and their complaints. Our goal at this time is to work with all parties to assist them in finding an agreeable resolution to this matter. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we will hear from Nia 2X from the National Action Network. Is Nia on the call? Jonathan, I can't hear you.
I wasn't talking for the group.
Oh, the camera's on you. Nia, are you prepared to speak now, or would you like to do it a little bit later? I'll come back to her. Actually, Jonathan, would you like to speak now?
I can.
That would be great.
Okay, awesome. First and foremost, thank you to big appreciation to, can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up, everyone can hear me okay? Okay, awesome. Let me give a huge appreciation to all the advocates, all the organizations that have labored to bring this press conference into being. Thank you, Meredith, for your coordination of this. I want to give a big hug to all the survivors on the line today and the representatives of the survivors and those lives that have been stolen from us due to this scourge of violence, this culture of brutality, endemic and systemic within our county and throughout the nation. Let me say this, and I'm gonna struggle to be brief as well. but to the point. We have been struggling. The Prince George's People's Coalition, which came into being in the late 1990s, during the time when the slogan was "Enough is enough," at a time when the Washington Post ruled that this police department was the most murderous in the country during a decade of 122 actual shootings, 47 deaths, all of them ruled justified. It was in that analysis that myself and Dr. Rodney Green, retired chairman of Howard University's economics department, we wrote a paper that is published online in the Urban Affairs Journal. It was published in 2015, and it chronicled 2016, excuse me, and it chronicled our fight and our struggle for police accountability in this county from 1970 until 2015. It's in that analysis. So I'm leading up to something here that points to the deep systemic nature of what we're dealing with. It is in that analysis that we took the period of 2002 to 2013, where there was a little over 7,000 complaints of police misconduct filed at the Citizens Complaint Oversight Panel. And within those complaints, less than 1%, in fact, in 2013, only one excessive force complaint ruled justified. We come up to the period of the Graham Report, 2016 to 2019, again, nearly 7,000 complaints, under 1% justified in terms of excessive force. And then when we look at the actual laws, Dawn is speaking to our fight and our struggle in Annapolis for serious police reform, serious police accountability. It was in 2016, the fall of 2016, September specific. I want to thank the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Josephine Parker Morning, for what I'm about to say, because she brokered this meeting I'm speaking to. In the aftermath of the legislative session in Annapolis in 2016, we met with Chief Hank Stawinski. Hector Velez was in the room, and we met with them on the implementation of a statewide law, a bill that was signed into law by Governor Larry Hogan, House Bill 1016, which empowers police chiefs across the state to appoint citizens to internal police trial boards, those trial boards that are charged with levying discipline on officers who have been found guilty of misconduct, gone rogue, etc. When we met with Chief Hank Stawinski, his position, him and Velez, their position to us on a bill that had become law was ambiguous at best in terms of its implementation. It's what the late Dr. King, that word he put into our lexicon, nullification. That's what happened. The law was nullified. So we have a law that's never been implemented in the county. And then we go into the Graham Report and find where racist officers were actually the ones who were by and large on the front lines of investigating these excessive force complaints, these massive complaints, reprehensible and morally indefensible. Reprehensible and morally indefensible. And so in connecting to that demand to enhance and to strengthen civilian oversight, we put forth here today that not only do we fight, not only we fight and advocate for enhanced civilian oversight, we're fighting and struggling for community control of the police. That's what we have to have here. The arc of the universe is long. We've got to bend it. The people got to bend it towards justice. We have been coming, give me about 45 seconds here. We keep coming back and forth to these politicians to do right by us. This police reform task force, the county exec brought into being 46 recommendations she's accepting. One of those recommendations is strengthening civilian oversight. We want community control. We want the people on the CCOP to come out of a recommendation process comprised of the people on this line. Folks like Nikki Owens, people like Dawn, people like Tracy Shan, actually on the front lines of that process. We want to see an executive director that comes out of this police reform community, either here in Prince George's County or nationally. We want a process that we actually control going forward. And then finally, I'm gonna say this, in the spirit of Nikki Owens, in terms of her final call to those who are supposedly in power. We say supposedly because the power is actually right here. This is a final call. This is what the advocacy community is. We are a buffer, an intermediate buffer, sounding a final call to the political power to say, enact the reforms and the changes that's needed. Otherwise, because we were there in 2015 when the reforms were not enacted, and shortly thereafter, Freddie Gray, shortly thereafter, rebellion in the street. So enact the reforms so peace can be tranquil throughout our county. I thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Prince George's People's Coalition. Join us this Sunday at 6 p.m. Join us on our Facebook page, Prince George's People's Coalition. Thank you so much. On and forward.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Next, Tracy, are you prepared to speak at this time?
Yes.
We're joined by Tracy Shand, sister of Leonard Shand.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
great. How you doing today? Excuse me if my thoughts aren't put together correctly. I've just been busy all day. But speaking on, the issues at hand, just like everyone has said, this is not something that's new. It's something that has been ongoing for a very long time. And as I took time to read through the Graham report last night, I just couldn't believe it. There's situations where Skowinski is like blaming Hector Velez for situations that he's supposed to be held accountable for. And I know that, in the legal realm, as far as attorneys go, if a paralegal does something wrong, the attorney is held liable for that. So I don't understand why Chief Skowinski wasn't held liable a long time ago, and he keep passing the torch to Hector Velez, and then now they're trying to put Hector Velez in office now to be the chief of police, and that doesn't make sense to me when there's so much corruption going on, and police officers are being brutalized and talked against and just being treated horribly. The police officers are taking these jobs to protect the community. They're standing up like Marines and people in the Army and Air Force. So I'm not understanding why they're being treated the way how they are within their department, and it's actually sprinkling out into the streets. Those same officers that are treating the officers that they work with horribly, they're coming out into our community, the Black and brown community, and they're treating us horribly as well. They're killing us, brutalizing us, treating us like we're not even human. And I'm here to tell you, we are human. We do bleed. We have feelings. That all those things exist for us. Believe it or not, they're there. So when I speak on this issue, it comes from a personal point. My brother was killed in 2019. And as I think about it, I still have not received the body cams. I still have not received a lot of information. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous and it shouldn't go on. And then when you ask for the changes in the community and you stand up 12 o'clock at night talking to senators and delegates and trying to get them to understand your concerns about how they're running your state, your county, your district, whatever, they're still turning around and saying, okay, we hear you, but then they go back and do the same thing and it's becoming repetitive. So what are we going to do next? What is the next move? What do you want us to do next? That's speaking to all the senators and delegates of Maryland, and all the officials in Prince George's counties. What do you want us to do next? I'm very curious to know, because we're doing all that we can do. We're following your laws, we're following your procedures, and it seems to me that you're not listening. So that's all I have to say for today, and I thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Tamara, are you prepared to go next?
Yes, good morning, Meredith. I am.
Let me introduce you. This is Tamara McKinney of Community Justice and Concerned Citizens for Bail Reform.
Good morning. The reason why I can believe this lawsuit is because, number one, I'm the daughter of a deceased officer. I'm the sister of a retired officer. I'm an aunt of 2 nieces on DC Metropolitan. Most recently, my niece had an issue and had to go to the precinct to get assistance, and she did not inform them that she was a police officer. She was disrespected. And she told me, Aunt Tamara, if I'm treated like this, I can imagine how the general public is treated in PG County. I want to say it's time to clean house. The first demand, because the agency is representative of its leadership. I've been in HR for 20 years. Seeing how records were hidden and covered. If you're in a position of leadership and you're not following your own policy guidelines, rules and regulations, we don't need to give you new instruction. We don't need to give you our wish demands. New leadership needs to come in. The current leadership needs to get out. There's no way that you can convince me that you are not going to follow guidelines, policies, and procedures in your leadership. You're not going to convince me that you don't know what's going on in your departments. You're not going to convince me that it was somebody else's job or that you assigned them to this task. You as leadership know what's going on in your camp. So I can't stress that enough. The taxpayer dollars that were wasted in hiding, redacting reports, hiding information, not acceptable, taxpayers. Citizens of PG County, you're taxpayers. They work for us. We don't work for them, they work for us. Get that clear. I don't care if you have a 5th grade education, an adult with a 5th grade education, a GED, high school diploma, or college graduate. You work and pay taxes, they work for you. Expungement of records of officers. In this report, it explains how they encouraged and they with expediency, they expunged records. Do you know you have innocent citizens that have gone through this system? They were declared innocent, not guilty. In 10 years, they're still trying to get their records expunged. So I would just say that it's time to clean house. Our leaders down there in Annapolis, we have election time that's going to roll around again. And if you are still not working, doing the work of the community, it is time for you to go as well. And I'm going to ask the citizens that's listening, stop voting because someone shows up to your church. I was guilty of that myself for many years because they shook my hand and they were friends with the pastor. Do your homework. Find organizations that can help you do your homework. If you don't know where to start, we're here. Get the information you need to vote them out of office. They're not doing the job of the people, it's time to go. And if you're leading agency that's concerning law enforcement and you're not following the law, you're kidding me? You're violating the Constitution, you have got to go. I'm sorry. So Meredith, let me end here because I'm going to go down a road that, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Tamara. Nia, are you prepared to speak at this time? I saw your hand raised.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I am prepared to speak at this time. Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. And I just want to say on behalf of not only the Greater DC Chapter National Action Network, but the founder of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton. He's working on the issue on a federal level. And it's not to say that the power of what the activists are doing in the local and state level, they're basically equal. because what Reverend Sharpton is working on is the George Floyd Justice in Police Act passed through a federal level, which governs all police departments, because not only is Maryland, Philadelphia, you name it, wherever they are, they're shooting and killing, we know what they're doing, and they have state prosecutors that cover for the police officers in every state in this country. So having the Justice Department to put in laws, but the laws are only acted upon from the activists that are here today, making sure that the state and the federal are following the guidelines. Now you take this administration, I believe that this law, HR 7120, will pass. It's not going to be the answer, the all in all, but it's certainly not going to be where we are now, fragmented, disconnected, when the state next to your right, your left, your top, your bottom is going through the same illegal procedures. Everybody's going through the same thing. So a federal law is a start. It gives the accountability to prosecute, and it's an extensive bill, HR 7120, put forth by Karen Bass, representative of the Black Caucus. So again, it's a federal level, demanding the Department of Justice oversight all of the agencies. But it is so important to keep the active work up, that these great organizations, these great mothers, families, people that have put in so much time and effort to do the right thing, not let up, continue on the state and local level as well, to ensure, as the lady that just spoke says, that the vote, when we vote, we have to be on that state and local level to keep the demands that we voted for you for police reform. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. So I think the effort to continue to push and to remember that that federal law will help each and every state have accountability to the Constitution and have something to fall back on where we can fire somebody or arrest somebody. When you make time, please read HR 7120, and under the Biden administration, it's more likely to pass than any other administration we can see in the near future. And I thank you for allowing me to say these few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nia. Last, we will hear from Ashanti Martinez, who is with CASA. Thanks so much, Ashanti.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Ashanti Martinez on behalf of CASA. We are the region's largest organization serving the immigrant community, with a growing membership of over 100,000, 25,000 plus of whom live across Prince George's County. At CASA, our mission is to create a more just society by building power and improving the quality of life in working class and immigrant communities. We are here to stand in solidarity with community members and their families that have been impacted by police violence and discrimination, along with the Black and brown officers who spoke up against the discrimination they themselves received and witnessed our community being mistreated. The unsealed Graham report only confirms what we at CASA already knew. Prince George's County Police Department has a storied history of police abuse and misconduct. The report shows that our police department cannot continue to operate with its current leadership. We join this coalition of community stakeholders to demand the Prince George's County Police Department clean house and install a new administration of leaders. We are also calling on County Executive Alsobrook to have a community-led process for selecting the new chief. Community voices must be leading this process, or trust in the department will continue to suffer. In 2015, leadership at CASA observed potential racial profiling of Latino youths by PGPD in an incident right outside of our headquarters in Langley Park. The Graham report goes on to highlight an email chain that included then Chief of Police, Mark McGraw, reporting this incident to him. The county confirmed that no investigation into this matter was conducted. You can read about this situation on page 80 of the over 200-page report that was released yesterday. It's clear that better community oversight of complaints is needed, and we demand that the Prince George's Citizens Complaint Oversight Panel be empowered to impose discipline and provide members of that panel be nominated through a community-based process that is representative of local police districts. Almost 3 weeks ago, County Executive Alsa Brooks unveiled a host of police reforms her administration would support. We ask that in addition to those recommendations, her administration adopt the 5 demands we're calling for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ashanti. Next, we will take questions, either about the Graham report itself or about the demands. Please put your questions in the chat. The first question that we have is, what is the response to the Manger report? Would one of the attorneys from the Washington Lawyers Committee like to take that question?
Sure. So we have a few points that we'd like to address regarding the Manger report. I'll start with 3 of those. First is that defendant's expert, Chief Manger, didn't actually conclude that the county was following best practices. Oh, I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
I'm muting. Hold on a second.
No problem.
Hold on one second. Let me make sure that, yeah, everyone, if you could please stay muted when people are speaking, we would appreciate it. Go ahead, Joanna.
Sure. So I think I was saying that Chief Manger didn't actually conclude that the county was following best practices in a number of key areas, and he actually couldn't have done that because just 2 months after he filed his report, the county's own task force on police reform identified 50 things that the county is doing wrong and it needs to fix. And those include fixing its broken complaint and disciplinary processes, overhauling its use of force policy and training, and also overhauling its recruitment of minority candidates. Another thing that the Manger report doesn't do is it doesn't defend or address many of the most serious issues that are raised in the Graham report. For example, he doesn't address derogatory statements that were made by the leadership of the Internal Affairs Division, including a statement denigrating the Black Lives Matter movement. He doesn't talk about the department's failure to address various complaints, one of those being the CASA complaint that you heard about on this call, another being a report from an assistant United States attorney that she had been personally racially profiled. Manger doesn't touch that, as well as a complaint by several county fire department officers that a PGPD lieutenant made a racist comment to a Black accident victim. Chief Manger also doesn't refute many of the systemic failures that Graham identifies in his report. For example, Sheriff Graham identifies PGPD's failure to prepare analytic reports evaluating potential discrimination in internal affairs investigations or discipline, which is one of the key allegations in our case. Manger doesn't address that. He also doesn't address any of the statistical evidence that demonstrates that Black and brown officers were subject to discrimination in investigations and discipline. Sheriff Graham also discusses PGPD's failure to enforce the department's anti-retaliation policy. Manger has no response to that. Similarly, Chief Manger doesn't address PGPD's failure to prepare early warning system reports to identify officers with multiple uses of force in a short time period. And that's just a small snapshot of the things that Manger does not address in his report. And lastly, Chief Manger's expert report often defends indefensible conduct. There are 2 examples in the Graham report of complaints that were made against an officer that he had engaged in repeated instances of racial harassment. But Chief Manger chooses to conclude that those were interpersonal disputes, not racial harassment. In another example, Sheriff Graham points out the failure to investigate or discipline a PGPD corporal who made a series of racist statements. And Manger defends the decision not to investigate or discipline that corporal.
Thank you, Joanna. Are there any additional questions? Just put them in the chat. How should the community interpret a task force that is, how should the community interpret a task force that is critical, that is of the critical police department, and a report that says that there is no problem? So there's a task force that happened in the Prince George's County that was critical of the police department. And then there's a report that's being put out by the county that there is no problem with the police force. Do you have any overall, does anyone have any overall thoughts about that you'd like to share?
John Hutto, Prince George's People's Coalition. I would just say very brief, it's very contradictory, of course, on the surface and on the face. And it speaks, and it definitely would say indirectly that there's a disingenuous disposition on behalf of the power structure, the political structure, in terms of police reform, to have those contradictory lanes taking place. They should simply speak with one voice that should presumably be everyone's message, but that's not the case.
Meredith, I might address Tracy's question as well.
Yeah, John, and then Nikki would like to respond as well.
So Tracy, I think you've put your finger on one of the key issues here, which is the county leadership wants to pretend everything is fine and that they can hide behind a report that continues to be redacted, that they say vindicates them, and they don't anywhere address that 2 months later, their blue ribbon panel came out with 50 recommendations as to everything that they were doing wrong. And I think the view of the attorneys and the view of many of the community participants is that that report is a good start, but it doesn't go nearly far enough, because the process that was used, cabining off issues that are raised in the Graham report from study by the task force, means that the task force couldn't address critical problems like the department's failure to enforce its use of force policies, the role of officers identified in the report as engaging in racist or discriminatory acts in reviewing uses of force by other officers. The overall failure of the department to respond to allegations and complaints from civilians and from officers about abusive, racist, or discriminatory conduct by white officers, and discrimination in discipline and promotions and ongoing retaliation. So the task force is just a start. The county can't hide behind Manger, shouldn't be allowed to hide behind Manger when it's in the process of overhauling its department. As long as it's overhauling its department, it should be addressing issues raised by the officers in this suit and the community organizations that are speaking here today.
Thank you, John. Next, we'll hear from Nikki Owens.
Tracy, for your question, how should the community interpret this? My cousin was handcuffed to the back in the front seat of a police car. He cooperated. He complied. He did not argue. All this is on video, every single bit of it. This officer was comfortable enough to get in his vehicle, drive 100 yards, pull out his weapon, and fire at him 7 times. This is how comfortable this officer was with killing a man in cold blood. My cousin was not a threat to him. My cousin was not a threat to his life. There was no struggle in the front seat of that police car. Nothing. But this PG County police officer was comfortable enough to do that. So what would I say to the public is that you are no exception to the rule. If you are a person of color, you are a potential victim. My cousin should have got a ticket. My cousin was in a car accident. He was not committing a crime. So what do I say to the public? You can let them tell you that everything is okay, or you can look and listen to the people who are being abused and trust that they're not all liars because they're people of color. They're not all criminals because they're people of color. So for the public, honestly, it's one of these things where, you know, we have racists everywhere. We have racists in every community, in every facet of life. So the community has to look at this, and they have to look at both of these reports, and they have to make a decision on what's true versus what's not. But I can guarantee you those dead bodies and those beaten bodies in the street are not a lie. Kevin Sneed, his PTSD, not a lie. Don's son, I've seen him talk. I've seen the pain in him. So if the public has any questions, tell them, reach out to us, because we will definitely let them know the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. We have one more question from William Ford. Ashanti mentioned the recommendations also Brooke released a couple of weeks ago. Are the demands that we're releasing today already sent to her office? And would a recommendation be to have some of the residents on the call be part of looking for the new chief? I would say this is part of us sending that message to, this is part of us sending the message to the county executive's office today. Would any of you like to, if there's a community-led process to establish a new chief, would you all like to be a part of that process? Is there anything you'd like to say about the importance of the community-led process for a new chief?
Absolutely, absolutely. People like Miss Also Brooks, who really is questionable in the seat that she sits in today, having the authority that she has today and not doing her job that the citizens have paid her to do. She's in charge of the police department. She knows about these egregious complaints. She's reading what we're reading. She worked side by side with Chief Stawinski. She allowed and permitted and hid and concealed and tried to protect this racist regime that, for whatever reason, and now the audacity to try to put someone else in that was part of that regime that's named in the report. It's an insult to every family. It's an insult to every citizen in PG County, the state of Maryland, and in the country. It's something that should be looked into more seriously. Why would you, who is over the police department, not take the seat that we're taking? Why aren't you with the citizens? You see these reports. What was it that held her back? Yes, we should be able to question her, to hear her answers, and to be able to analyze and determine her credibility and the reason she has her job today, because she had the authority to put this in perspective years ago. And it went on and it continued into, unfortunately, the circumstances that we're talking about today under her authority. We're sick of the games. We're sick of playing this back and forth volleyball coming on your side and my side. We're talking life and death. And we need to nip this in the bud. These parents should not have to come out year after year. Family members continue to come out. Yes, we need to be on the board and tell the truth, exercise our power as citizens, and remove people that have authority and not do what we, the tax citizens, are paying them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Nia. Does any of the other group representatives want to say anything about the community-led process for establishing a new chief?
Yes, hi Meredith, this is Linda Thomas again. I have started a work group for this, and I'm hoping at this point, I have 5 organizations working with me, but I'm hoping to get more. I think it's important that everyone has input in this situation, as well as other county appointments. It's important that people get feedback because we're not all familiar with what's going on. I don't know all the stories that's out there. We need to know them. And so I do believe that we have to do this as a collective group. We need hundreds of organizations, if possible, to make our voices loud enough so that everyone can hear, not just the community, but our legislators as well. And so with the support of all of us, I believe that we can make some changes, but we've got to do it in a hurry. And we have to make sure that we are putting in bills, and we have to support those bills. And so I ask that if anyone is interested in working with us, with our group, the NAACP, we would love to have you, and we would love to join your group if you have a group that we can join. So please get in contact with us because we are looking forward to help. Thanks.
Jonathan, was there something? Thank you very much, Linda. Jonathan, was there something that you also wanted to say?
Yeah, I just want to say real briefly, thank you, Meredith. I just want to say real briefly, our experience in Prince George's County throughout the years and decades now has proven that, and let me say, I'm not saying this to marginalize or nullify what was said earlier. We must be involved in the selection process of the new chief of police. But let's be clear. We have to get some radical policy changes in order to affect and in order to shift the culture of brutality in terms of policing in relationship to our communities. In other words, that this change is not going to come about through a benevolent chief of police. It simply is not. As long as you have a law enforcement officer's Bill of Rights that is still sustained at this very hour, as long as you have a House Bill 1016 that hasn't been implemented in 5 years, as long as you have a fraternal order police that wields much more influence at the state level and the county level than all of us on this line combined, and that fills the coffers of the politicians. And the politicians listen more to their coffers than they listen to us. As long as we have, the most salient and reprehensible example at this very hour is State Senator Michael Jackson, District 27, who is the former sheriff of Prince George's County, who actually carried the water for the fraternal order police and led the charge to undermine the efforts of Senator Jill Carter of Baltimore in leading us and leading our efforts legislatively to get radical reform to the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. All of us should have Michael Jackson as our example. As our example, this was the 2010 Jack Johnson County Executive selectee. That was Jack Johnson's man. And a decade later, this is what he does to the Police Accountability and a community and to our people and to our constituency. So yes, we got to be involved in the selection of a chief, but we got to go deeper. What we're faced is more profound than the selection of a chief.
Thank you, Jonathan. We're going to take one more person on this one, and then we have two more questions to answer. Ashanti, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, just really brief. To Jonathan's point, we believe that those closest to the pain should be closest to the solution. And we just want to see those that have been impacted by police violence and by this police department now have a voice in selecting their leadership, because if we want to move forward, we have to do it in a collaborative manner.
And thank you very much, Ashanti. And then there's a question for the NAACP that the NAACP did not support Stawinski in the end, and it impacted his leaving. You know, there's consideration going on now to make Hector Velez the new chief. I guess the question is kind of, does the NAACP support removing Hector Velez as the acting chief and not making him the new chief of police?
First of all, let me share that I am the new president of the NAACP. And so because of that, we have a different approach to our selection pattern and how we support individuals. And so at this point, we have not made a decision, but we are not in support of anyone at this time. We want an opportunity to see all of the candidates. We want a thorough investigation of each and every candidate. And so I'm not making a commitment to support anyone at this time.
Thank you. And we have one more question. Let me go back up here. The county executive says the civil suit brought by the Black and brown officers and the task force are separate issues. Does anyone want to share any thoughts about the idea that the issues raised in the lawsuit and the issues discussed by the task force are completely separate?
Sure, I can handle that. That is an artificial distinction that Angela Alsobrooks has chosen to make. The lawsuit has raised issues of policing concerns from the very beginning. And at the beginning, Ms. Alsobrooks said that she wanted this task force to look at all aspects of policing in Prince George's County. But by creating this artificial line, she has forced the task force to ignore issues about persistent failures to look at the way that internal reports of abuse and racism are handled, the way that discipline is handled within the Prince George's County Police Department. And even by failing to give the task force itself the Graham report, which is something that entirely the county could have done, it hamstringed the task force efforts. So no, there is nothing inherently different between what the task force is looking at and what the issues that the plaintiffs in this lawsuits have been bringing forward, not just since they filed this lawsuit. But let's also remember that the officers who brought this lawsuit were raising these issues within the department for years. And they had to bring this lawsuit in order to actually get people to listen.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Did anyone else want to speak to that question? That is the last question that we've identified so far.
This is Nikki. This is just my unsolicited opinion about the task force. I believe that the task force, first of all, my family was invited to speak at the task force and then they silenced me. So I didn't get to speak at the task force. The task force is full of people who either have political aspirations or people with a political background of some sort, who works with politicians, who deals with politicians, and who are on the side of politicians or the police department. So for me, I feel like the task force is useless anyway. I feel like if they want to create a task force that's going to provide useful information, they should speak to scholars, people who are actually studying this, people who can go back and look at racism within the police department for years and come up with solutions to fix their disgusting problem. But they choose to just choose people who are connected to them, and people who will recommend things that will seem like they're doing something and there's actually no action that's going to be taken. First of all, these shouldn't be recommendations. These should be actual changes that happen, not a recommendation. And I think that the whole point of their task force was just to put something out there for show. There was no real meat behind it whatsoever. So for me, if there needs to be some type of a task force that's going to actually make a change in policing within Prince George's County, then they need to get people who actually understand the problems, because they didn't fill that task force with people who understood the problems. They put political sympathizers on there, people who are either bought and paid by the FOP. They did not put people on there that could actually give them a comprehensive understanding of what's going on, something psychological, that they need to understand that there's a problem with these police officers. They probably need psychological help. They just put a bunch of people who know nothing about the actual issue and why a person would actually go out and just murder and beat another person. So for me, I feel like the task force is useful, and that's just my 2 cents about it.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And that is all the questions that we have. If any of the reporters need access to the source documents that we're talking about, the unredacted Graham report, I'm going to put my contact information into the chat. We also have a summary document that has page numbers annotated in it, so that it can help you find the specific points that we are highlighting from the report, which is quite long. So I can also send that to you. Any further questions before we close? Katie Metler from the Post was asking whether the 5 demands will be sent directly to the county executive's office. And yes, we will have someone send it directly there. Any other questions? There will be a video of this press conference that's been live streamed on the Washington Lawyers Committee and the ACLU of Maryland's Twitter and Facebook pages. So you can find video of this there and share it as widely as you can. And thanks so much, everyone, for sharing and speaking out. Nikki, did you have something else that you wanted to say? Okay. Thank you so much. And we'll get this done. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Meredith.
Good job, everyone. Salute. Onward and forward.
Thank you, Jonathan. Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith.
Bye, Sonia.
Hello, Meredith.
All right. I think it's just Tracy, Amber, and I now. Hi, Tracy.
Okay. How you doing? I'm sorry. I'm sitting here. I have to get
Hold
a
on, we're gonna
paper.
stop. Amber, are you able to stop the recording? Hold on 1 second, Tracy.
Sure, no problem.
Amber might have stepped away from her desk. Do you want me to call you, Tracy?
Sure, you can. You can.
Okay.